amazing live promo, and I enjoyed the storytelling. And what I said about earlier about having not much reward for a long-term fan, this actually is the opposite. This gives you reward for paying attention. And I really liked that. I've watched it about 3 times now, and I keep picking up bits that I missed, little bits in there, and I'm like, that's, you know, every time I'm watching it, I'm finding something new. And there's loads of little hidden bits in there. And I loved the way they just told that story. And it was almost like taking apart John Cena as a man, in a way. And I felt like it was very, very well done, very well produced. And for a change, like I said earlier, a nice reward for anybody that's been paying attention to Bray Wyatt and John Cena in particular, their dynamic since the last WrestleMania. What did you think of that one, John?
I've got to be honest with you. When I first saw it, I was completely perplexed. I didn't know what I'd just seen. I did, the following morning I had to. That was the first thing I kind of put back on the network, was that Firefly Funhouse match. I went straight to that match to rewatch it, and then kind of listened to a few of the podcasts and tried to piece it all together and make sense of it all. Because on first viewing, you don't really know what's going on. To be honest with you, you kind of do, but then you kind of don't. But I've got to say, I absolutely loved it. A, because it was just completely different to anything we'd ever seen before. And B, because it did kind of tie up them loose ends to WrestleMania 30, when you had Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family as the hottest thing going. Yeah. And everybody thought that this was his kind of the pass of the torch moment, or the moment where John Cena was going to do the right thing and put Bray over. And of course, he squashed him. And then it's kind of downhill from there, to be honest with you. And yes, he had a good career. He's a captivating character. And we know that he's very, very capable in the ring. But it wasn't until nearly a year ago now, about April, May 2019, when he came back as the Fiend in this weird and wonderful Firefly Funhouse, and it kind of pricked our attention again. And he's been probably the most engaging character in all of WWE in the last year or so. And then, of course, we saw what happened at the Saudi show. We just spoke about that. And then it does tie up all them loose ends to, John Cena spending all them years getting himself over, going over at the expense of Bray at WrestleMania 30, and Bray having to repiece his career together, repiece his life together. This was the culmination of, like you say, a 6-year-long story, you could say. But it is very, very clever the way they put it all together. And it was obviously a lot of work there on behalf of Bray, because I think he's been, the kind of the mind behind everything that's happened in connection with the Firefly Funhouse and the Fiend and everything like that. So it was very, very clever. But credit to John Cena for going ahead and going with that whole segment, because it was almost kind of burying John Cena, really, and putting himself in a position where he's saying, I know I've buried people in the past, and yes, I know I've done it at the expense of other talent, but there was subtle things in there when John Cena was hitting Husker the pig, that was to signify Husky Harris, and that was when the original Nexus was around, and Husky Harris, I don't know if Husky Harris was part of the original Nexus, but he was certainly part of the second wave, but I think he was involved somewhat. So I think that kind of was to signify that. My favourite part has to be there where you had the puppet Vince McMahon at the commentary desk, and such good shit. And of course, that emanated from a John Moxley podcast interview with Chris Jericho. So it proves that people behind the scenes watch and listen to that sort of stuff, and are prepared to kind of play it to their own advantage at the same time as taking the mickey out of their own boss, which I thought was very, very clever, very brave. And that Vince McMahon is kind of okay in all of this behind the scenes, so he must have got a bit of a pop out of it as well, I suppose.
Am I right in thinking that Jeremy Borash put both those together? He was like the main part of both these things, or was that just the Boneyard?
Well, my understanding is that the Boneyard match was put together by Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and Michael P.S. Hayes. Right. Okay. I do understand they kept it to a very limited number of people. Obviously, you had Taker and AJ Styles there, contributing to the ideas. But Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and Michael P.S. Hayes were the main people. But I do understand that Jeremy Borash was there, offering his insight. But he's not one of the main guys credited for putting that match together. I don't know who was behind the Firefly Funhouse match. If I'm honest with you, obviously you're going to have Cena and Bray Wyatt and maybe one or two of the kind of head honchos, but that's my understanding anyway.
Yeah, very well done, both those, and loads of little subtle bits in there that you can really pick the whole thing apart. I enjoyed it. You know, I came out of that and I thought, oh man, because of the night before, I was even more disappointed that the whole. I mean, nobody knew this was going to happen. Let's be fair. In hindsight, it's very easy. But let's just say, Bray Wyatt have kept that title and done this angle with John Cena for the title, with John Cena trying to beat Ric Flair's record, that on the line as well. There would have been another layer to it, and because this was more about John Cena in a lot of ways, I know that at the end result is the right one because Bray's got the rub, the Fiend's got the rub finally. But I think through that whole thing, it was breaking John Cena down. And if they'd have just had that allure of getting that title, trying to capture that title, trying to beat Ric Flair, trying to outdo it, I just think that would have been an even more epic story to tell. And it was such a shame because obviously we had what we had the night before for the title. And I was just like, it just would have been even more, I think, even more memorable than it already was. No doubt it doesn't go down quite as a match, but I mean, it's for me, I'd rather have that than have those two guys in an empty arena, quite frankly. I just don't think you would have got the passion. And I'm not saying John Cena and Bray aren't passionate, but I just think you got to feel it from the crowd a lot in those things. One of the things, John, that I liked about both those matches, and I think they worked perfectly well, is, I don't know if you remember, but do you remember the House of Horrors match and the stuff they've done before this that's like it? I've got to say, some of those, I really cringed at those matches. Just the little things like Randy Orton getting out of the limo in full wrestling gear. I was like, why would you travel that way in wrestling gear? This makes no sense. And then the commentators would like do commentary over the top of it with music, and I was like, what's going on here? I think the fact that they didn't have the announce team all over it, this works so much better. There were little things, the way it was shot, that made it better.
Yeah, it's more cinematic, wasn't it? It was more motion picture, more cinematic, added to the drama. And I think that now they've kind of started this. I mean, I think Lucha Underground did it very well, and obviously we saw quite a lot from Impact Wrestling with the Hardy Compound. But I think now they've broken the back of it with the Boneyard match and with the Firefly Funhouse match. It's really going to give them scope for experimenting a bit more with these sort of big matches. And obviously, you only get, this type of feel WrestleMania once a year, but obviously if we're going to be in lockdown and if quarantines and playing to no fans in arenas, empty arena matches for months to come, many months to come by all accounts, then they're going to have to continue with this kind of imaginative motion picture storytelling that's going to keep us coming back and keep us interested.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think a lot of my listeners, they always send me in their dream matches, and of course the one that comes up every time, every year, is Sting and Undertaker. And I never want to see that so much in a ring. I certainly don't want to see it at a Saudi Arabia show. I would much rather see it in this setting than I would in the ring. Because, first of all, they're both such immense characters. They don't need to go into a ring and break their back anymore. They're both legends. And I think you'd get so much more out of doing it as cinematically as possible, getting the best out of them. They haven't got to break their back. They can take as many cuts as they want. They can make it look even better. I'm much more for that style between Sting and Taker than I would be in a ring. And it's no disrespect to both of them, but I just think, look, this match, if it was going to have happened, it should have happened maybe 5-6 years ago. I'm not really sure I'd want to see that now. Either in a Saudi show or at WrestleMania. What about you, John? Would that be the same for you, or would you still like to see them in the ring?
No chance. No. I mean, I said this on our Night One review when we covered WrestleMania 36 Night One, and when we were covering the Boneyard match, myself and my guests, we agreed that this is a rebirth of The Undertaker, if anything. What that match has done it's kind of lengthened The Undertaker's career. And I don't think The Undertaker should step foot back inside of the ring again unless it's to do a promo or an angle.
Mm-hmm.
Never to do a match, but to, maybe once a year, maybe once every couple of years, bringing back for these boneyard style matches or these cinematic type matches. But I think everybody's first reaction after seeing that match was, we can do it now. We can finally see The Undertaker versus Sting. We can finally see it because it plays perfect. Like you say, they can cut and edit as much as they want. It can be absolutely terrible, but they can turn it into something fantastic. They can have all the pyrotechnics and all the kind of extras, and but what we saw between AJ and The Undertaker, and you had the OC there and all the druids, it worked and it was absolutely fantastic. And with The Undertaker turning up on his Harley, and you had you had the rock music playing in the background, they could do that. And I'm sure somebody's already been in touch with Mark Calloway and Sting and said, look, regardless of what's going on with WrestleMania 37, we've got to start thinking towards that potential match. But like I said, I think this has given Mark Calloway another 5 or 6 years of these type of gimmick matches. It's lengthened his career, but I don't want to see him inside a wrestling ring, and certainly not with Sting.
Yeah. Do you think there's is there an argument here, John, that you feel like, because obviously my listeners, they were so happy about that match, they want more and more, but I'm a little bit. I kind of think if you keep throwing it out, it'll get boring quick. So you've got to be careful with who you use. And I think certain characters really fit that format. But I don't think I'd necessarily want to see Daniel Bryan and Nakamura in the same type of thing. I don't think that really needs it. But I'm all for Undertaker, Bray Wyatt, and those kind of characters. Like Mankind would have been another perfect example. Those kind of characters.
Another name that came up in my podcast was Aleister Black. Undertaker versus. I mean, that would be an amazing way for the Undertaker to make a new star in Aleister Black, and Aleister Black's character fits that type of setting perfectly. Wouldn't you say?
Much. Yeah, very much so. So, I guess the sky's the limit there. I definitely think they've opened the door for that going forward. Whether I will say one thing, I think when they do that match again, I would suspect that if once we get past what we're in now, we go back to the audience. I don't suppose if you was in the live crowd, you would have loved it as much just standing watching the screen, because we've seen that before where the crowd kind of just boo all the way through those kind of moments. But I do think that if it was like a one-off thing, because we've seen this now, I think the fans would be much more accepting of it done this way. But as long as it's not just 5 times in one show or something. So I just think fans would, and it can't really main event either, because if you was there in the live crowd paying customer, I just think you'd be like, what? Do you know what I mean? I've come pay good money to watch the TV. So I think they can do this, I think, but they just have to just find the right format for it, and don't throw it out every time, make it mystique, make it so we're going to look forward to it like we are now. And hopefully this will become quite a new thing. And I was quite surprised just how positive a response it was. It was I've not really heard many people. And this I even listened to Jim Cornette, and even he liked it to a degree. So you know where it's coming from.
There you go. He doesn't like much about the modern wrestling world, does he?
No, that's what I mean. So I was quite shocked. But as he said, you needed variety. You needed something different, because now just to sort of climax WrestleMania coming out of this. One of the feuds I was, the most intrigued match I was really looking forward to, and the feud I'd enjoyed the most was Edge and Randy Orton, because again, they hit a lot of things. They were blurring the lines with reality and story, and I like that when they do things like that. And obviously we got to the match. I'm not going to lie, it was bloody long. There was something, I don't know if it's because of also again, it's night 2. We've come off of that Boneyard match. We've also had a match between Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins that probably it over-exceeded how good I thought that was actually going to be. So I thought once I'd seen that match, I thought, blimey, what's Edge and Orton going to do the next night? Because they've used everything around that open bit. So what can they do? And obviously they just literally gave us a tour of the whole thing, using whatever they could. But I'll tell you, the two things that really took me out of it, A, was the time of the match, and secondly was the commentating. It was abysmal for me. Just that whole talking and like whispering in